topic of how to make a better India, but I'm sure our guest today is going to, simplify this sort of a big, bold statement, which is our title, and how we can translate into a more, tangible and a believable story for all of us. Before I invite him, as always, our protocol, let me welcome our guest by giving a brief profile about him. Although I know most of you have messaged me, you're all a huge fan of Sir. We all read your books, read your articles, see you on TV all the time, so needs no introduction. But still, it's my responsibility to say a few lines about Sir for those who may not be aware about the depth of work he has done in his life. Sir is a well-known management guru, author of innumerous number of books, articles, columns, whatnot. But some of the famous ones, which many of you have heard about, is India Unbound, The Difficulty of Being Good, which some of us also experience, Karma, The Riddle of Desire. Sir has also written a lot of novels, drama, plays, acts. Sir has graduated honors from Harvard University in philosophy. He's also attended Harvard Business School, AMP, where he has been featured in their case studies as well. He was, like some of us, in corporate, and at the age of 50, when he was CEO of Procter & Gamble India, he decided to go for his inner calling. I know Sir has been writing novels and books at an early age, but at that age of 50, he actually took that, as he likes to say, that midlife crisis. He took this conscious call of becoming a full-time author, writer, and thinker. And we are also grateful that he actually did that. And he's got wealth of experience, and I'm sure we'll all be really enamored by what he has got to share with us. With this, a very warm welcome to you, Gurcharan Das ji, for really, gracing this platform and sharing your valuable time with us. Very warm welcome from all of us. And before we get into conversation about specific topics, and I know a lot of you are also writing questions as I speak, I just wanted to, because if you see what Sir has been writing about, if you've got a chance to go through his books, you will realize that he's very bullish on two things. One is the India story and what India could be and what it stands for. And second is also how each of us individually can actually contribute. I know Prime Minister Ji has been talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, and we talk about corporate social responsibility, societal responsibility. But if you see what is a nation or what is a society, it's built by all of us, right? So I always like to think about individual social responsibility, because a bottoms-up function of individual social responsibility is a societal responsibility. If I was talking to Kiran Bedi ji, I remember 2 months back, and she said that what is a nation? It's built of people, right? And you said India should be corrupt-free, India should be really efficient, we should be tech-savvy. If all of us are honest, if all of us do a good job, if all of us are not corrupt, then obviously by default the country becomes that. So the country is sum of parts of all of us. So I think that's a very powerful thought, and I would really like to welcome you, Sir, to actually help us unearth on a high level that how we can actually culminate this mindset that individually, if we are able to shape and design our life for a better version of ourselves, that would actually lend into a broader vision of achieving a better version of our mother country. So if I may request you, and obviously welcome you again, and if I may request your initial thoughts on some of these areas. Sir, आप म्यूट पे हैं.
ये आपने मुझे म्यूट कर दिया. अच्छा, so I'm delighted to be here. Let me quickly say, you called me a guru. To me, a management guru stands for good at understanding, GU, but relatively useless, RU. Now, we all want to be happy. And I have a one-line definition of happiness. And that is to love the work you do and love the person you live with. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit, before we get on to the main subject of building a better India, I want to talk about happiness at work. And what does it mean? After all, we spend 1/3 of our lives at work. And if we don't love it, I mean, it's like partly wasted, no? And so to me, some people think, well, it's about finding yourself. Like, I mean, they also say in a nation is about finding the nation. But in my view, that's not correct. It is about creating oneself as it is about creating a nation. And so I'll just give you a 3-4 minute summary of how I went about creating myself. I was young and I was lucky. I got a scholarship to Harvard University. My father was a middle-class engineer working for the government, and he couldn't afford to send me, but I had the scholarship, fortunately. And my mother said, those days, all mothers suffered from middle-class insecurity. She says, go to Harvard and become an engineer like your father. So I arrived at Harvard and I was going to become an engineer. But then I discovered a whole world that I didn't know. I discovered history, literature, philosophy, architecture, music. And I kept changing my major every year: economics, politics, all these things. And I took courses in all these things. And I kept switching my major every semester until even Harvard lost its patience. And they said, by this third year, you have to now make one decision and stick to it. And I even did Sanskrit at Harvard.
Wow.
So I chose philosophy because I wanted to know how to live a meaningful, flourishing life. And I graduated in philosophy, and I got a fellowship to go to Oxford to do a PhD. But just before going there, the week before, I was at my parents' house and I lay down on the grass. I looked at the sky and I asked myself, do I really want to spend the rest of my life at that stratosphere of abstract thought? Because I loved life, I wanted action. And so I said no. I wrote to Oxford. My parents were very confused. They didn't know what to say. My neighbor, my mother's neighbor, would come and ask her every day, "Toda munda ki kar raha hai?" And she didn't know what to answer. So to spare her the embarrassment, I answered an advertisement in the paper for the company that made Vicks VapoRub. They were looking for management trainees, and they hired me. And instead of saying that, what am I doing in getting my hands dirty in the bazaar, sitting down with Jethalal Meghji, a wholesaler, and this over chai, talking about the rates in the market, I actually began to like it. And so I had just come for dinner so like the man who came to dinner, I stayed on. And I stayed on for 25 years. But meanwhile, I also had this side of me, the intellectual side. I wanted to satisfy my mind. And so weekends, I kept reading, I started writing, I wrote 3 plays, I wrote a novel. So I lived kind of a double life, 5 days a week at work and 2 days being a writer. And by the mid-40s, as you said, I had a midlife crisis when I came to work, and I was head of global strategy at our world headquarters. And I was looking at the market shares of our brands, Oil of Olay and Pantene shampoo, Tide detergent, Ariel, Gillette blades, all good products. But I said, there must be more to life than this. And that was the beginning of that change over and I ended up becoming a writer. My point here is just this, that this is not, I've given you three examples of where the conventional life would have led me to engineering, would have left me to do a PhD. And I broke in all cases. And I said, I'll do what I want to do. And so essentially the idea is that I think we can all create ourselves. And the important thing is to feel happy about your work. And even in selling Vicks Vapor Rub and going to the bazaar, carrying a bag and meeting panwalas and kiranawalas and all that, I like that. And one can get pleasure from all kinds of things. And that's what I mean about creating yourself. Instead of bitching about, oh, I could have been at Oxford studying Aristotle, that's not how, at least I feel one should think of it. Anyway, I've spent after that 25 years now as a writer. So 25 years as a businessman, 25 years as a writer. So then let me come back now to the idea of the nation, because we're going to talk a little bit about India. And the nation also, as I said, is a creation. It's not something, a nation is not, it's what I call an imagined community. It's invented. And Gandhi understood this idea. He was inventing India every day. And a nation is not based on religion. In Pakistan has proved what a disastrous idea is to create a nation on the basis of religion. You don't create it on the basis of language. There is no natural basis for it. The best kind of nationalism is not about power. Nationalism is about your memories, your home, your geography. And frankly, every nation has to prove itself worthy to make you a citizen in the nation. And so it is up to the nation, and the nation that gives you good opportunities, gives you good governance, so that your life is predictable. That is the nation. So every human being should be able to choose which nation he wants to know. Of course, we can't do that, unfortunately. So I want to just tell you, when you think about India, I think of India's modern history in terms of 3 milestones. One was the first milestone was when we were born in 1947. And we were born under the shadows of Hitler, Stalin, and Mao in the most violent 20th century, created by saints without shedding an ounce of blood. This is an amazing birth of a nation. Unfortunately, after that, there was partition. But partition was not state-sponsored violence like wars were, or like communism was. It was state-sponsored. So here and for the whole of 20th century, we skipped the 2 world wars. We didn't have the kind of violence. So we have been a place of peace, relative peace, apart from that tragedy of the partition. Now, in 1947, we only got our political freedom, because right after that, we lost our economic freedom through a socialist system created by our first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. And frankly, we waited 40 years to get our economic independence, which was in 1991 through the reforms. And that was really the rise of India. The middle class in 1991 was only 8%. Today, it's 33% of the country. The the reforms of 1991 lifted 380 million people above the poverty line. Now, this is not as much as China. China lifted 600 million. But still, this is a great achievement. And so there were other things that came with in the 1990s. English became the language of the not only of the street, but of the fashionable middle class. You know, the Z television announced one day, Aaj Middle East mein peace hogi. Up 3 words of Hindi, 3 words of English. And then English also became an Indian language. And so we became confident as a people. And the third liberation, political liberation, economic liberation, third liberation was 2018, which I call the emotional liberation. And for that, actually, you should read my book, Karma, the Riddle of Desire, because that deals with this area of emotional life of a person. And there, you know, it started with the removal of triple talaq, which liberated half the Muslim women. It went to the decriminalizing homosexuality. That actually liberated maybe 15-20% of the people. And then you had the liberation of the removal of adultery, which was based on the premise. It was only the man would be convicted, the other man, but it was based on the idea that the woman was man's property. So that premise went away. And finally, the entry into temples and the Me Too movement. All these combined, September 2018 was our emotional liberation. Now, the remaining liberation that we are waiting for is what I want to talk to you about and what I mean about making a better India. To understand that, we have to really understand the idea that India in the last 70 years has been a bottom-up success, unlike China, which is a top-down success. Now, what do I mean by bottom-down? Bottom-down means that India has succeeded despite the state. The state has put obstacles in the rise of India. It's the people of India who have risen. I wrote a book called India Grows at Night When the Government Sleeps. Now, that is the idea. That the government's core reason, Bhishma tells Yudhishthir in the Shanti Parva, in the Mahabharata, that the only reason that we need a state is to give us peace, both against enemies outside, also crooks inside. So law and order is the primary reason for the state. And just look at this today, that it takes 15 years to get justice in the courts. How many people can afford to wait for that long? You have 33.5 million under trials who have yet to come to trial. That's not justice. So we have been failed by the judiciary. Police. How many of us wants to go to a police station? You know, we're scared to go to a police station. That's not how it should be. They're supposed to be protecting us. We are trying to protect ourselves from the police. So there are problems with the state. And the liberation that I'm talking about, the fourth liberation, is the liberation when we get good governance. Now, we say, you know, China very easily, we don't want to live in China. I agree, I don't want to live in China because there's no freedom. But they have good governance. That if there's a robbery in your house, you report to the police, they'll find the culprit. Okay, am I back? Okay, am I back? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can
Okay,
hear you.
great. So what I'm trying to say is that a liberal democracy has three pillars. It has, number one, a state that gets things done. Now that's our problem, the capacity of the state to deliver us law and order. The second thing a state does is its actions are governed by law. And the third is that those actions are accountable to the people. So what I'm trying to say here to you is that the state in India has failed us in our core functions. In my view, if we keep doing the reforms, prosperity will continue. We've had since 1991, to today, that is almost 30 years, a 7% growth rate. This compares to 3.5% growth rate from 1950 to 1980. So it's almost double. Meanwhile, the population rate has come to half. So therefore, all the growth rate is going down to the per capita, to the individual. And what I'm trying to tell you, prosperity will spread, COVID will be over if we just keep doing the reforms. But now, if I were the Prime Minister of India, my first priority would be to see why can't I give justice to the Indian people in 2-3 years, like it is in other countries. Why do the people have to be afraid of the police? And why is police just a handmaiden of the chief minister? There isn't that I would focus on. Why are 1/3 of the people in parliament and the assemblies criminals? That's the problem in our parliament. Why does a civil servant, I'm talking about administration, an IAS officer, who works 2 hours a day, get promoted on the same day as a guy who works 14 hours a day and makes a big difference? These are some of the problems. So I feel Mr. Modi's main priority has to be to fix the reason why Bhishma said to Yudhishthir that the state exists, which is the state which gives predictability to me in my life. So let me finish there, and maybe we can do the rest. I can talk forever. We can talk about other things as a part of a question and answer. Is that all right?
Yeah. In fact, sir, when we talk about nation building and some of the areas you've already touched upon, I was just, going through some of the, talks you've done and some of the editorials you have written. And I have always seen that education and skill development is one of the areas you are very vocal about. And we all understand and believe that if an individual needs to contribute to the economy, unless he or she is relevant in terms of skills to actually be, contributing to GDP growth, it's very difficult. The individual becomes a burden otherwise. So, and the new education policy has also recently come. I'm sure you have.
So let me answer your question, Kartik. Yes, we have a new educational policy. It's a good policy. And I wrote a piece in the main edit page on the Times of India saying 1.5 cheers for the NEP, for the new education. I said, why didn't I give it 3 cheers? It's such a good policy. It's really very, very, and I talked about 10 things that are good in it. But I believe it won't solve the problem of our country, which is exactly governance. You know why? Because in a government school, 1 out of 3 teachers doesn't show up. Average across the country. They're absent illegally. And 1 out of 2 who's present is not teaching. So no wonder even the poor, middle class left government schools 20 years ago. But now the poor have also abandoned government school. Today, 47% of India's children go to private school. So private schools are not for the rich. The average fee of a private school is between 500 rupees and 1,000 rupees a month. And so, but the problem is that the private schools are also not very good. And the reason for that is that it's very hard for an honest person. You know, there's a demand, so much demand for private schools. Every year you have these long lines of
Right.
parents waiting to get their children into a school. That's heartbreaking. They won't get in. And the reason is that it is very hard to open a private school. You need 125 permissions. And out of those 125, 15 require a bribe. No, and politicians can do it. But honest people, idealistic people, educationists, teachers who want to start a school, they can't. So therefore, we have to remove the license Raj out of this education. And so it again goes back to governance. It's not no matter how good the education policy will be, but it won't be able to solve this problem of the license Raj to open a school or to run a school, or it will not solve the problem of absentee school teachers. School teachers get their jobs by bribing politicians. You know, one chief minister is already in jail because he was bribing. He bribed huge number. This is Chautala in Haryana. He's in jail because he accepted huge number of bribes to give jobs in schools. So schools actually are a great creator of employment. In fact, today's problem is jobs. Hospitals and schools are a great way. So that's why I keep saying that the government should give money to students. Every child at the age of 5 should get a scholarship until he finishes school. And let the scholarships of the children can decide whether I want to go to government school or private school or wherever, or Doon school, they'll get a scholarship. And so that I think is the better approach my answer to your quick question.
Right. And in fact, a follow on to that is also, sir, that there's also a saying that a sick body and mind can't learn, right? So even if we have all these mechanisms in place, what are your thoughts on the healthcare policies, some of the insurance initiatives government has taken to actually create a healthy nation as well?
Excellent, excellent. I'm glad you talked about that because, frankly, I'm a fan of Ayushman Bharat. I think it has given every poor person in our country 5.5 lakhs of rupees in benefits. And the premium is very modest. And if you are below the poverty line, the government pays your premium. Now, what does this mean? It means that a poor person then is equal to a rich person. He can go to the hospital of his choice. And if he has the money, like the insurance is money, he will be treated by the hospital with respect. And the best thing is, it's not that the government should be running hospitals. It's not that government should be running schools. Government should be governing. Governance is the job. Law and order, things I talked about. They shouldn't run schools, run hospitals. The government should, through DBT transfers, we should give money to people like the Ayushman Bharat is doing, or as I recommended, there's 25% reservation in schools, private schools and all children of poor. I would give that money to the poor, to the people, DBT transfer. Then when they go to school, they are respected. I'm bringing money. So that's again the point. So just as a rich person can choose healthcare, he doesn't have to depend on a government clinic where doctors are absent, nurses are absent, where medicines are stolen. He can be like anybody else. So that's and also both healthcare and education are huge job creators because they're very labor intensive. It's like construction, housing, all these are labor intensive activities. And that's what the country needs, jobs at this stage.
Absolutely. And in fact, some of these schemes you have mentioned, Ayushman Bharat, and there are a bunch of other schemes around, even providing people with homes, Awas Yojana and whatnot. In most of these schemes, and you've also touched upon governance in the first half of the talk, a lot of, if we look at other countries like Dubai, UAE model, or in US, people, or even in some of the European countries like the Estonia model, I really like the way they do e-governance. Everything is online. Everything is done directly to the beneficiary through an app. They use blockchain, artificial intelligence, and entire governance is done in a very seamless and a structured manner. Do you think in India, with the kind of challenges we have, both infrastructural and mindset, do you think we are still far off from that e-governance sort of a model to enable these initiatives, or do you think?
Well, actually, Kartik, I give this government also credit for pushing digitization in the country. And the digitization, what we call the JAM Trinity. The JAM Trinity is Jan Dhan Yojana account, Aadhaar card, and M is mobile telephone. With that, today, almost we have 600 million smartphones now in the country, as 600 million people connected. And with that, now I think it's just India is the largest, fastest growing market still in the telecom area. And so what we will have is actually, we are going to skip over. We won't, the ordinary Indian will never have to see a branch of a bank ever. Just as he never saw the landline, he went straight into the mobile phone. He never saw the landline. So he will skip the bank branch. He will also skip many of the things. Frankly, digitization is also improving governance because you don't need to see anyone. You don't need to interact with a government official. You can. It can be all, like my tax return every year. I haven't seen a tax officer ever since I did e-filing. So I would say that digitization is something that India is on a roll, and it's a good thing, and we will do well.
Right. And sir, because AIMA, we've got a lot of people who are SME owners, startups, and they're all very anxious with the current situation where, both from a demand perspective, it's a swindling demand, and at the same time, many of them are also looking to raise funding. Otherwise, their businesses will not sustain for a long period of time. How do you see this double whammy of, slow consumer growth from a demand perspective and the allocation of capital going to high risk industries is also slowing down? So what message do you have for startups?
Well, I think that the government has approach in its stimulus that they gave, essentially of that stimulus, 90% of it was credit expansion. Right. It was not giving money to the people. And I think that was the right approach. And the important thing, though, is that the government really needs to make a very big effort to register people. All the SMEs are not registered. The micro enterprises, they have to be there. And even in their case, actually, it's not credit. They just need a little money to get started after the pandemic. So there has to be a different approach to them. But what your point is correct, that today the credit is the need of the hour. And the big overhang that the government has is this debt overhang. And that's been going on. The NPAs are 10 years old now.
Right.
They started in the UPA 2, and they've not cleaned up this twin balance sheet problem. And that is, you have to fix that area. And I think they're going the wrong way. this merging of banks, etc., which they're going to make good banks go bad. When you merge a bad bank with a good bank, the good bank goes bad. So the answer is to just have 3, 4, maybe 5 public sector banks, and the rest should all be privatized. And because frankly, the bank managers are not lending. Reserve Bank is crying every time they lower the rates, and those guys don't lend because they're not accountable to customers. They're accountable to CVC, CAG, CBI. So it's the wrong for the government. Again, it should not be in business, running banks. It should be running governance.
Right. Absolutely. In fact, sir, so these are the SMEs and startups. But, even in AIMA, you've got a lot of managers with us, right, who are working in corporates, large companies, MNCs. And as you are aware that in this new sort of world order, the new ways of working have emerged, whether it's about people working from home, uncertainty around employment, government regulations around furlough and whatnot. So what advice do you have for some of these young managers who are truly experiencing the VUCA world, as they used to theoretically say, to actually come to terms and manage productivity of their employees in such a pandemic?
Yeah, no, there are two things. I thought, actually, let me talk for a minute. Since we are talking about also creating a better India, and you started by saying, what is our responsibility for a better India? I would just say that before we talk productivity at work, the responsibility of every Indian is not to talk only about Modi and Rahul Gandhi and what's happening. You can't do anything about that.
Right.
But what you can do every week, once a week, focus on your neighborhood. 2 hours a week is all I say. Every Indian, especially if you are privileged, if you're educated, you have a job, give 2 hours a week on Sunday or Saturday in your neighborhood. Meaning, find out garbage collect किया के नहीं है, सड़क बिजली की बत्ती किसी ने तोड़ दी है, the lamp on the street, खड्डा है दुकान सड़क में. Those are the things that we can do something about, and then work with the local authorities, whether it is MCD or whatever your municipal thing is, wherever you are, but work with your neighborhood, work with your resident welfare association, work at the micro level, join, be active in the. That is real democracy. That is real democracy. 2 hours a week. Get out of your house and go and participate and make your neighborhood better. And don't talk about Modi and Rahul Gandhi and all. You can't do anything about that. And at least not until the next election. So we'll worry about that then.
Fair enough. And so last area, in the interest of time, which I want to really seek your comments is, you've talked about India and creating a better nation, but we are not alone in this world, right? India is part of a larger global fraternity and global village. And with whatever is happening right now between the trade policies, restrictions on certain apps from certain countries, and different kind of, when I talk about travel tourism, air bubbles are being formed, differential agreements and treaties are being looked at. How do you see in the long term this planning out for India as part of the global fraternity? How are relationships with certain, we know about Middle East now getting rejigged with new sort of arrangements and maneuvered by US. So in light of all these, where do you see the future of India and the role of India as a key catalyst in the global growth?
Well, I think that the rise of India from 1991 onwards has been, a lot of it has been a result of the global economy, the globalizing of the world. And this trend is not going to go back, despite Mr. Trump, despite Mr. Modi, who has brought back protectionism to the country. You know, Atmanirbhar has two meanings. It can mean self-reliance or self-sufficiency. Now, self-reliance is good. We should be reliant. But we should not have this illusion of self-sufficiency. We need to be part of the global economy. And no country became wealthy. No country went from being poor to middle class without exports. And our exports have been stagnant since 2013. This is a big failure. So the important thing is, I'm just talking the economic side of your question. The important thing is that we should be open. We should have joined RCEP. We should be part of every international pact. And we should make alliances with the US, with the EU, be very active in the international markets and reverse the protectionism, lower tariffs back to levels which will allow us to export, join global supply chains, and become a proud member of the global community. On the point of view of politics and international relations, China is something we have to worry about. And therefore, we have to be part of a global alliance to contain China. And the answer is not to stop Chinese goods from coming in, or the answer, yes, you don't need thalis from China. You don't need Ganesh Murtis from China. We don't need chamchas from China. But very important intermediate products, pharmaceutical intermediates, we will ourselves lose out if we stop those imports, because they are a major export contributor. So we have to be very selective. So we should do with China. We should do with China what helps us. And we represent only 1% of China's imports. India, but for us, for China is 14% of our imports. Right. So we will get hurt more than they will get hurt. And so let's do what is right for our country. And I would just say that's the main thing, that our real problem is China. Pakistan is just a irritation, I mean, people take Pakistan too seriously. I would ignore Pakistan, but I would watch China.
Yeah, fair enough. In fact, I think we're almost out of time now, and most of the people are sending me comments recollecting your articles from 1990s and 2000. They're all big fans of you, and some of them have even asked me that, do you still have the same views on socialist economy and market economy the way you used to have a few years ago? Do you want to give?
Well, I think so. I mean, the point is that I consider myself a classical liberal, but I am also, being an Indian, we have to be aware that the very poor deserve our attention. Right. And so, I mean, the migrant crisis during this COVID was heartbreaking. So there has to be a way that we can protect the very poor. At the same time, let's not forget, I disagree with people who say, give 10,000 rupees a year to every Indian, or something like that. I think that was the Congress Party's approach. The only way that you will create demand for the economy, which you talked about, to get back the jobs, is to focus on in job creation. Job creation is, as we talked, education, health, construction, housing, infrastructure. Invest in those. Encourage real estate. Real sector is in serious trouble. Have to hold its hand. And so that's what Modi promised. Achhe din was a code word for jobs.
Right.
And I'm afraid that those haven't come yet.
Asymptomatic, some people are joking that those are asymptomatic. Achhe din, we're not able to see, but they're probably there. With this, we are at the end of the session. Thank you so much, sir. I feel like in last 45 minutes, and I'm sure all of you would second that we feel that we've got a capsule of nutshell of economics, politics, international relation, a short capsule class of everything, and the wisdom you have crystallized so beautifully. We are eternally grateful to you, sir, for sharing that with us in such a short time. And we really appreciate you taking out time to be with us, with our AIMA YLC family. On behalf of the entire AIMA family, I present my gratitude. And I really look forward that in times to come, when the situation improves, we would be able to welcome you at our AIMA conference center and actually have a face-to-face interaction with all our members here. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I hope you also had a good time sharing your thoughts with our audience. And we really look forward to keep seeking your blessings and advice on what's happening around the world. And we would keep pinging you again and again to come and share your wisdom with all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Pranam. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Kartik.
Thank you.